Alabama has that deadly combination of being both inadequate to actually do what we need to do as a state, but also regressive in punishing the less money you have.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
There have been some new stats that have come out about Alabama recently that Adam has been seeing has seen flying around, and so he compiled all of them in for us. So Adam, go ahead and take it away. Talk to us about what's going on in the Yellowhammer State.
So, wanted to talk about Sweet Home, Alabama. In the last few months, we've seen some really interesting studies released about the quality of life for working people here in this state. Back in December, the Public Affairs Research Council of Alabama, or PARCA, released a report on state tax collections across the country. Their findings? Alabama had the country's second lowest tax collections per capita in 2019. Only Tennessee collected less state and local tax revenue per resident than Alabama. Alabama has the lowest per capita property tax collections in the country, and our state's income tax is essentially flat, with the top rate of 5% applied to an individual's taxable income over only $3,000. Meanwhile, Alabama has among the highest sales tax rates in the U.S. So, Alabama combines low tax rates with a less valuable base of economic activity, yielding less in taxes per capita and less revenue for state and local government to actually provide services to the public, i.e., the reason they're supposed to exist. And the taxes that they do collect here in this state tend to be regressive, meaning they disproportionately affect working class people, while income and property taxes disproportionately benefit the wealthy. Sales taxes hurt folks a lot more the less money you have. Those grocery taxes that you pay at Walmart and Publix and Kroger, yeah, the wealthy aren't too worried about that.
Right.
But the rest of us, yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, because, I mean, working people spend their whole income, basically, or a lot of their income surviving. So it's just, it's intuitive that sales taxes hurt working people more because there's a flat kind of expenditure that you have to do to live, and let's put that at, I don't know, $25,000 or $30,000 a year. Well, if you make $35,000 a year, you're spending all of that on goods and services, and on that is being applied 8-9% sales tax, whereas if somebody makes $300,000, they're only spending so much money, and that amount of money is being taxed at the same rate as when you buy a thing, but they've got a lot more income to absorb that tax. And that's why we say that sales tax is regressive, and income taxes are, even where income taxes are flat, they're not regressive because it's proportional. If you make $30,000 or you make $10,000 in a year and you pay a 5% income tax, that's going to hit you, because you make so much less money. It's not quite the same, but there's at least a proportionality with a flat tax. Really, we should be looking at a progressive tax where the more you make, the more society has benefited you, the more you have to pay back to society to help people who are less fortunate, who don't have the same income as you. But that's sales taxes, getting so much of our money from sales tax and still taxing groceries, mind you.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
One of the only states in the country to fully tax groceries. And of course, whenever Alabama is desperate for revenue, they love to go to user fees and licensing fees and sin taxes, quote unquote, on alcohol and tobacco. We saw a recent gas tax increase with this current legislature, which obviously right about now is stinging a little bit for most of us. So Alabama has that really deadly combination of being both inadequate to actually do what we need to do as a state, but also regressive in punishing you the less money you have.
Yeah.
So if you check the show notes, you'll see a write-up from Alabama Political Reporter back a couple months ago. You can find a link to that full report from PARCA. And last month in February, there was new data from the National Center for Health Statistics, which was released indicating that of the 50 states and the District of Columbia, Alabama ranks 49 of 51 overall in life expectancy. This data is also from 2019. The national average for life expectancy in the U.S. was 78.8 years, while the Alabama average was 75.2 years. In other words, living in Alabama costs 3.5 years off our average life expectancy compared to the national average. And no surprises here, but the report showed a strong correlation between a state's poverty rate and their life expectancy. And of course, Alabama has more poverty than the national average. Also in February, our friends at Alabama Rise commissioned a survey of likely Alabama voters with the research firm Signal to find out how people felt about Medicaid expansion. The results? Well, roughly 7 in 10 Alabamians, including nearly 2/3 of Republicans, support expanding Medicaid when told about the arguments in favor of expansion. There was similar support in the survey respondents for using American Rescue Plan, or ARPA funds, towards Medicaid expansion. This comes on the heels of another report from PARCA, which shows Medicaid expansion could save the state nearly $400 million a year while creating over 20,000 jobs per year and producing an overall economic impact of $1.8 billion per year. The report also found that the annual savings would be higher than the annual cost of the expansion. Worth remembering when legislators and governors blame lack of a financial plan or budget implications as to why they can't expand Medicaid.
Right.
As a reminder, we've seen 8 rural hospitals in Alabama close from 2011 to 2020, and Alabama is one of only 12 states to not yet expand Medicaid. Expanding Medicaid would cover nearly 300,000 Alabamians, which would of course be a huge boost to quality of life and would literally save lives. And as a reminder, there are people that are caught in the coverage gap, in the Medicaid gap, where you make too much money to qualify for Medicaid as it exists, but not enough money to get significant subsidies through the ACA or to be able to really afford decent health insurance. So that's about 300,000 of our neighbors who would immediately benefit and be able to go to the doctor, to get preventative care, to get life-saving care, and maybe, just maybe, our life expectancy wouldn't be 3.5 years shorter than the rest of the country.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the arguments against Medicaid expansion are just nonsensical.
They don't have them, really.
They don't have any. They always point to the budget, but these people, they're supposed to be business people, right? And business people should know that you have to spend that you can spend money to make money, right? Like if a company like Amazon, for instance, used the same logic as our legislators in Montgomery do to refuse expanding Medicaid, if Amazon operated by the same logic, then they would not be building distribution centers across the country because it costs money. It costs money to build those distribution centers, even though Amazon gets crazy tax breaks and governments fund a lot of it.
Maybe it didn't cost a lot of money.
But it costs some money, at least. It costs some amount of money. But
Sometimes
they do it
you
anyway.
invest.
Yeah, they do it anyway. Why do they do it anyway? Because it's going to make them more money than it costs, as is obvious in the case of Medicaid expansion. It will obviously bring in more money for the state of Alabama, create more revenue to have less people dying, okay? I mean, on so many levels, but at the fundamental level, it's just that intuitive. We will have fewer people dying if we expand Medicaid, and on that basis alone, we will generate economic activity.
Again, in a state that is known to celebrate family values and where every politician brags about their religious faith on TV, I mean, I would think saving lives would be a pretty big priority. And
you would think,
as you mentioned about the opposition to it, if you actually go back and check when this poll when the polling data was released, there were some statements from various Alabama officials in the legislature and elsewhere, and they really didn't have much of an answer beyond, I believe one quote I saw was, "There's not much appetite for this in our caucus." Okay. I also saw, more comments along the lines that you mentioned of making sure that there's the long-term viability of the program financially. Again, we now have a plethora of research to show that it would pay for itself. But even if you are concerned about that, you want to be on the conservative side, Alabama Rise has put out a plan. They've discussed it here on this show to where you could actually remove the federal income tax deduction, the FIT. You could remove that from Alabama's tax code. Remove the grocery sales tax, right? So you're increasing taxes on one end, you're removing taxes on the other end. It would generate enough extra revenue to replace the sales tax on groceries, pay for the upfront initial cost of Medicaid expansion while providing extra funding in case there are overruns in the future. And oh, by the way, you would have extra money left over to invest in people. And the majority of Alabamians would actually see a tax cut, right? The majority. The only people who would end up paying a little bit more would be the very wealthiest, who are paying larger income taxes at the federal level. So naturally, that's why it hasn't happened yet.
Yeah.
So check out coveralabama.org for more information about this polling data, about more of the research behind Medicaid expansion, why it should happen, why we need it to happen, and how you can help with that. But all this to say that we have an inadequate system of taxes that favors the wealthy while punishing the working class, both in its regressive sales taxes and the lack of government services. We have a quality of life that is so bad in this state that our people live shorter lives. And we have an example of a policy here that could help both the quality of life and the economy that is broadly popular with the people of Alabama. So what is the Alabama legislature doing? Arguing over how to restrict your right to protest, seeking to discriminate against transgender kids and their families, and all sorts of ways to participate in the cultural war spectacle while preserving a status quo that is completely broken for working class people. Two of the most significant union battles in the country are happening right here in this state, with the union drive at Bessemer's Amazon warehouse and the nearly year-long strike by coal miners in Brookwood. Meanwhile, our politicians remain silent about these struggles, or they just straight up tout the company line, even though getting more Alabamians in unions would address all of these major issues detailed in these recent reports. Alabama is at the top of everything bad and at the bottom of everything good. We deserve better, and a better Alabama is possible, but only if we come together, build a diverse movement, and organize our workplaces and communities to fight for the better Alabama that isn't just possible, but necessary.
You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.